Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Pro AV today. Excited to have the conversation that we're going to have today. I just got back from G2E a few weeks ago out in Las Vegas, really to learn a little bit more and ask the questions about not only the gaming and betting market, but maybe some of the opportunities and understanding more about the compliance and the legality of those markets, especially when it comes to the AV side. And, really what I found out is that there's a lot of room to learn more and ask more questions and understand, especially as states like Ohio legalize betting in restaurants and retail locations and things like that. So I said, you know what? I got to go straight to the source. I got to bring someone on who knows a lot more than I do about this topic, and naturally had to bring on Christopher Justice over at Global Payments. Christopher, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, appreciate it. Good to see you today.
Christopher, you have been an outspoken voice in the gaming and cashless spaces, not only in kind of the betting markets as a whole, but across really a number of different verticals in B2B. And, you've seen probably better than anybody the innovation of technology and, some of the places that we have come from and maybe some of the places that we're going to be going in terms of technology, integrated experience, things like that. But specifically on that gaming side, where are we right now in the life cycle of that enterprise innovation, right? We're at a point now where things keep changing, but how much further do we have to go?
Oh, well, I guess, frankly, it's a great question, but let's face it, with innovation, the sky's the limit. And primarily just, and there's a variety of reasons for this, but the gaming market specifically really lags behind a variety of other markets relative to innovation. Part of that is due to regulation, whereby if you think about the rest of the world, uh, there's an opportunity more for forgiveness than for permission. Uber's a perfect example, right? They launched their application in 2010, 11, somewhere around there, right? They start securing all of these people who want to just drive for a living. There's no licenses, there's no taxi cab steal, there's no nothing, right? And they start popping up around the country. At which point, right, then the legislator or whomever decides, whoa, 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 what's going on? Maybe we need to apply some regulation for rideshare types of activities. And this is a US phenomena where you start a business and then the regulation typically follows that. The gaming world is 180 degrees different. It is very much ask for permission, because if you're asking for if you're asking for forgiveness, that's likely to come with civil and or criminal penalties associated with it. Um, so so there's a dramatic difference between that. So when you think about where is innovation, 2007, the iPhone was introduced. 2009, Bitcoin was introduced. 2014-ish, Apple Pay was introduced. But it's only been, starting backward first, right? It's only been within the last couple of years when Apple Pay truly became relevant. Bitcoin became the topic of conversation because as you get innovation, you start out with then implementation and getting in to test customers, figuring out how it's going to work, making sure that you kind of work out all the bugs, and then it becomes mainstream. So most of these things have a kind of a 10-year path. Well, when you get to gaming, you get that 10-year path, and then you start getting into the fact that the conversations are now current and relevant. Now is when you also start having conversations with the regulators around, okay, how are we going to build regulations that allow these new innovations to enter the marketplace so that we ensure game integrity and that we ensure that only suitable organizations and suitable people are running those organizations.
Well, I love that you brought up the Uber example, and that's one that's actually super applicable to your hometown of Las Vegas. I remember when they shut it all down, right? You couldn't get an Uber. They they made it illegal to get an Uber, and the taxi drivers were pretty upset about that. And eventually, they got to a point where they settled on some fixed fare rates and things like that. But what's funny, especially when you kind of look at the AV and kind of integrated technology worlds, is for the longest time, really, they've been part of casinos in more of a tangential way, right? Whether that's digital signage, displays, lighting, or event venues, things like that. And now the real use case of being involved in that actual gaming technology, whether it be kiosks, whether it be mobile device integration, whether it be a number of different avenues, we're now at a place where we're having to ask a lot of questions and make sure that we're not, coming in from ground zero trying to, fit a square peg into a round hole. Christopher, as you think about some of those people and maybe even some of the hardware manufacturers and tech providers that are coming into this space, what are some of those things that they need to be cognizant of before they ever really even try and dip their toe into it?
Well, certainly some of it is, I think, to do the due diligence to make sure that the products and services that are being supplied, um, depending on their connectivity to the infrastructure, make sure that it is legal and permissible to be able to provide those services. And some of it's also to know who the customer is and who is ultimately providing the service. So that is a giant non-answer. So let me try to get more specific. If it's something that effectively impacts the gaming system itself, whereby it could impact the outcome of the game, or it's somehow connected to the devices associated with that, then all of those are really delivered by someone who is licensed. So if you're talking about screens and the like, those screens are provided to one of the major manufacturing gaming license holders. Those folks have gone through their suitability investigations and are legally allowed to then provide services to casino operators. Therefore, those manufacturers would effectively fall underneath the license of those license holders. If for some reason the product or service that's getting delivered has to be delivered directly to a casino, then it might be that a requirement of that particular state or jurisdiction to go through suitability investigations for that company. And the reason that all of this stuff came about is, you think back to, way back in the dark ages, whether it's the movie Casino or what have you, the government was really, through the RICO Act and a variety of other things, looking to eradicate organized crime from casino ownership. So they got rid of the Bugsy Siegels and the other people, got them pushed out to where the majority of the gaming operations today, right, are very significant public companies and the like. But part of what happened is, as you chase the organized crime out of casino ownership, then they were migrating into things like waste management and housekeeping and food service, et cetera, et cetera. So the net under which gaming licenses are cast really continued to expand and expand and expand to make sure that people who were unsuitable were removed from those organizations. So while, and I'll use a payments example, we've received calls from the Department of Gaming because some sales rep in some other disparate business within Global Payments is putting a payment terminal, for example, in the coffee shop of a casino, which for anybody in the payments world, that is not a gaming transaction. It's a restaurant transaction. We're not in a bet. We're not doing anything that anywhere that you would even remotely consider gaming. However, if that's underneath the rooftop of a casino, it can be considered a gaming transaction by the regulator. And guess what? They're the only ones that matter in that discussion. If the gaming regulator says you have to be licensed, you better do it, or you can face consequences of not following their guidance, if you will, or requirements.
Well, what stands out too, and you talk about it really being 180 degrees away from the try it and see crowd. Historically, the AV community and the installer community, has had quite a bit of participation in things like sports books and more from like the display side, the aesthetic side, the experience side, and not specifically like the actual betting terminals. But there are regulations actually in place for the infrastructure, right, to make sure that the the infrastructure can't be hacked, but also that the infrastructure is delivering the signal at an appropriate time, not on a delay, not too fast, not too slow. And those are things really where you almost don't know that they're problems until you run into it, right? So it's not an industry that we can dive into cold, but what's been interesting to see, and I think that we see this really on a macro level as well, especially, with things like our cell phones and, personalized experiences. One of the biggest trends I saw at the show was this idea of kind of the all-in-one personalized experience piece of hardware, whether that's like a video poker terminal where you can do all your betting, watching your TV, do all your cashless betting and things like that. And that I think is indicative a little bit more of really this trend of personalized gaming. Not only necessarily at sports books, but I talk about that mobile device, that being a place, whether it's DraftKings, whether it's FanDuel, a number of different places. Is that where you're seeing the technology and the market head more towards that more towards the individualized experience instead of maybe that communal experience?
Well, I would say it's maybe a little bit of a dog's breakfast in terms of how I can see some of these things playing out. I think as consumers, we've all become increasingly omni-channel. You're at Nordstrom's looking at clothes, but yet you're online checking prices for the same article of clothing against other online retailers. You could also be checking into their online inventory because maybe they don't have the size that you're looking for in stock, but they can ship it to your house the same day from another store. So we're all using our mobile phone, using our other resources to figure out, well, let's face it, right? How to get what we want, when we want it, how we want it, because we are an on-demand, right now type of society. And I see the same thing going on in gaming, right? Because you think about it, you're sitting there playing blackjack and you're enjoying that, but there's a TV on the back wall playing the Dallas game, right? Oh man, hey, Dallas, or it's getting ready to come on. I think I want to go ahead and place a sports bet that Dallas is going to win the game on Sunday. Or you see some play to where the odds are changing, so now you want some in-game play on who's going to win the first half, who's going to score the most points, if the next ball is going to be caught or dropped or fumbled. All of those kinds of activities are going on. All the while, there are other exciting things going on around the casino. So the ability to then deliver all of these things to that on-demand customer to give you what you want when you want it, right, are there and capable. And I think everybody's trying to approach those things differently. I mean, from our perspective and the things that we do from a payments perspective, our solutions like VIP Mobility are really meant to be able to help facilitate your ability to pay, because we're connecting your financial accounts back to the casino to make those things occur. But how they get delivered, I think, is really where the arm wrestling is occurring. From my perspective, you are bringing your technology to the table every time, right? It's your most trusted device in most cases today, right? It is your number one screen, having replaced television a couple of years ago. So the more that we can deliver those services down to you in a way that allows you to kind of pick and choose what you want on the device that's most trusted and most familiar for you, I think is the way that things will go. However, for folks that are selling slot machines and other types of devices, they're trying to figure out how to make their screen more relevant than the one that you have in your pocket. So therefore, they want to try to glom on all of these little components in order to try to replace what you're already bringing to the table. And I think only time will tell as to whose capabilities will ultimately win out. Because at the end of the day, the one that will win out is whatever the one you think is most important to you.
Well, look, you talk about that omni-channel approach and that battle for focus. And I think one of the places it's going to be most interesting to see that whole battle play out is in Ohio, right? Starting in 2023, at the end of this year, Ohio is adopting updated regulations for gaming in restaurants and retail locations. And, it scares me a little bit to be able to walk inside a Buffalo Wild Wings, have a couple drinks and bet the whole time. But, especially, from a global payments perspective, you guys are across a number of different verticals, not only gaming specifically, but, how does somebody like a retail organization or a restaurant ownership group, how should they approach something like this, right? They've got POS systems and all that, so they've got some infrastructure, but they've got probably zero clue or zero understanding of regulatory compliance when it comes to gaming. Talk about the impact on some of those organizations.
Well, it's really going to go back to the licensing part that we discussed. And they will have a solid menu of things that they can select from. So if you think about your Buffalo Wild Wings example, in order for them to participate in gaming of any form, those people will go through a licensing and suitability investigation. They will get then their official license that will enable them to participate at whatever level the state allows or that they've signed up for. At that point, they will thoroughly understand that in order to participate, they must only participate with other licensed regulated providers. So those people will all be kind of coming to the table to say, hey, here's what the physical devices look like. Here's what the virtual opportunities are. But each and every one of those folks would be licensed, would be listed on the Department of Gaming's website as being somebody that they can officially do business with. Because again, the ramifications of, oh, hey, I found this gray market thing that can't be regulated, and I'm going to put that into my Buffalo Wild Wings. Somebody's going to get a fine, probably at a bare minimum. Somebody's going to lose their license at a bare minimum, and somebody might even go to jail. So everybody will walk the line, and that's part of why, as you think about the American Gaming Association and organizations like ours have really been leading the charge with conversations with folks like, with legislators like the folks in Ohio, to eliminate kind of the black market gaming, because part of anybody that's licensed does go through a very rigorous gaming lab investigation where things are checked. They make sure that the math is correct. They make sure that these games are operated in a fair and equitable way so that there's no opportunity for folks to create kind of foul play on the backside that erodes the trust in not only the industry, but erodes the trust in the state of Ohio and its legislator and regulators and all the people who are trying to create a safe and effective environment for everybody who participates.
Well, look, and as that piecemeal kind of approach continues to spread around the country of state by state, making their own decision, there's a massive importance of understanding each one of those states, specifically from an AV integrator and installer perspective, right? You talk about not only working with licensed hardware providers or manufacturers or service providers, the burden of the audio visual and integrated technologies community actually goes way, way up, right? We have to be able to not only be proactive and understanding, but be prescriptive in the way that we're creating these technologies, especially when we talk about things like integrating into retail and restaurant locations. Just from a high level, what are some of the things that from an integrated technology perspective, maybe it's one or two things that you recommend, but what are some of the things that you see as probably the number one or two priority from an AV integrator and installer perspective?
Well, and it's without getting into, I guess, necessarily AV integration and what have you, it's really more kind of let me take it maybe more from a high level perspective. As new jurisdictions open and as some of these things expand, by and large, the new states do tend to adopt the rules and the regs of a Nevada. They might, if it's an international location, they're bringing in Nevada, Singapore, in other rules and regs that are more, I think, generally business friendly kind of rules and regs. And so as they bring those things in, I would say that there's generally a fairly generic core of minimum internal controls. And by the way, right, we're talking about a phone book of rules, regs, internal controls, but there's generally a very generic core that is kind of adopted across the country, where the nuances start to kind of expand and create gaps is really around the innovation. Because when you think about it, most of the gaming regs and stuff were written certainly beyond 2000, let's call it circa 2000. So now, as I mentioned earlier, right, the iPhones come out, Apple Pays come out, Bitcoins come out, all of these new technologies are coming out. And the thing about gaming rules and regs that are different, if you will, than like InfoSec regs is they are very prescriptive, as opposed to an InfoSec reg that says build and maintain a secure network, and some auditor has to make sure and check the box and put their license on the line to say this meets the standard. In gaming, it is very, very prescriptive about what you must do and how these things must be done. So innovation is where some of the gaps start to exist from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And I think that's also an area where you start to look at, okay, I've got a solution that I want to be able to implement into this particular market, and it is not specifically allowed. Therefore, you've got to start working with your law firm to go, or in general counsel to go into the regulator to start looking at changing the language and the nuances of that language to make sure that you can fit your technology into the jurisdiction.
Look, Christopher, that's incredible insight, and I know one. Frankly, insight that our community is going to take to heart, right? And I'll plug this as well. I mean, some of the work you guys are doing on the global payment side not only is revolutionary in the gaming side, but really across a number of different verticals. And if any integrators are watching, have any questions, definitely reach out to Christopher on LinkedIn. Because he's already been a great resource for us. But Christopher, we appreciate your time today, and thanks so much for coming on.
You bet. And by the way, I guess one parting comment, as you're engaged with a licensed casino operator, you can definitely ask those folks the questions as well of, hey, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm compliant? Because needless to say, if they're inviting you in and buying your product, they're on the hook for it as well, because as a licensee, they take responsibility for all of their vendors. So they should be able to at least help guide folks down the path if it's something that's going to create a kind of a minefield of operational problems, going forward.
Well, Christopher, thanks so much for giving us those words of wisdom. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to watch again on the next episode of Pro AV Today.
Hey, thanks a bunch.